At 18 months old, my daughter Dani was diagnosed with severe autism. She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, and I set out on a mission to figure out what was going on and how I could actually help her. Over the next 18 months, dedicated my time fully to her and her recovery. And by the time she was 3, she was fully recovered and healed. She has since been discharged from all therapies and been given the all clear. And in this video, I want to give you the steps that I took right at the start to help her on her healing and recovery journey. Hi, for those of you who don't know us, I am Mel and this is Dani. Dani is now 4 years old. It's 2026. Here is some video footage of Dani at the time of her diagnosis at around 18 months old.
What you doing, baby? Trying to open the drawer? That one's locked. She's spinning again. Dani, come here. Dani, Dani. Nice hands, Dani. Dani, nice hands, Dani. Hey, Dani. Dani. You watching your sister swing? Nice hands.
As you'll see, she was unable to walk, she was unable to talk, she was unresponsive to her name, she made no eye contact, there was constant stimming, no communication, no interaction with us at all. Now, watch this video. 18 months later, when she was 3 years old, you'll see her playing with her sisters in a video. She's on the right, she's the blondie, completely fully healed.
Dani, did you want the pink one? No. Oh, I want the big one. You can have the red one and I can have the pink one. Mommy, I get the red one for Minnie and I get the pink one for me.
That's so kind. Thank you for sharing so nicely.
My prayer and my hope for you and your child is that this would be your story too. To be clear, I want to just say this, people with autism, they're not broken. Most are truly, absolutely brilliant minds, but they experience challenges that most typically developing children don't face. And that is why this is so important to me. Not because I think autistic people are broken, but because I didn't want my child to have any additional challenges. I feel like life throws enough of those at us, without having to have anything else thrown in the mix. I wanted as few challenges as possible. So please don't hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying that your child needs to be fixed. I'm saying that I didn't want my kid to have any extra challenges. And the steps that I'm about to share with you is in case you feel the same way and you want as few challenges as possible. Let me start off by saying, virtual autism is not even a medically recognized term. My daughter was never diagnosed with virtual autism. She was diagnosed with severe autism. If you haven't watched my video on Dani's introduction, I encourage you to go and watch it. But when I got the diagnosis, I really felt like something was wrong. There was something off about what I was being told. It just didn't line up in my spirit. So I began to research. Autism. What are the signs of autism? And I started to come across this term on the internet that was actually coined by a Romanian clinical psychologist in 2018 by the name of Marius Theodor Zamfir, I believe, in 2018. He coined this term virtual autism. And basically, this condition is characterized by autistic-like developmental delays and symptoms in very young children linked to excessive screen time. Now, I asked many people, many of the specialists that I was working with, the people that were supposedly helping Dani with therapies and stuff, I asked them about this term. They told me it didn't exist and that, television wasn't the issue. The only person that actually acknowledged that there might be a connection with the television, and at least speech delay was the speech and language pathologist. They said that a television could definitely cause developmental delays in the area of speech and language. But outside of that, there wasn't a single doctor that acknowledged my questions revolving around television exposure, screen exposure, and virtual autism, and actual autistic-like symptoms. I just want to put that out there because even today, I haven't found doctors that will acknowledge that. All of that to say, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not a medical expert. And the condition I'm talking about is not even medically recognized. All I can share with you is our story. What happened with our daughter, the exact steps that I took to heal her and bring her back. I'm simply sharing my experience. You go and speak to your own doctors and your specialists for personal medical advice. I just want to share my story and what we saw and what we now believe. The very first thing that I did was I identified what needed to change. The first thing was screen time. The second thing was her diet. And the third thing was parent-child interaction. So we went from watching a lot of television, the TV was mostly always on in our house, to zero. We went completely screen free. For about 2 years, the television didn't come on at all unless all the kids were in bed and asleep. Well, it was a huge, huge adjustment. The second thing was her diet. I had come across some information on the internet about gluten and dairy being a cause of developmental delays. And I got in touch with the doctor. I tried to find the article I found, but I couldn't find it now. But I've linked to the doctor that I spoke to. She's in the States. I spoke with her and I decided, based on what I'd read and what I had seen with what she told me, was to remove gluten and dairy. And I focused on whole foods, good proteins, and good fats. And I did a lot of meal prep wherever I could. The third thing I did was I focused on parent-child interaction. I just decided and committed that I was going to engage her all day. No matter what activity I was doing, I was just going to bring her into that activity. I noticed that when I gave her free time, like free playtime, her stimming grew excessively. And when I interacted with her and kept her engaged in whatever I was busy doing, it reduced drastically. So I just said, okay, you know what? I am going to make every moment count, and I'm going to engage with her in every minute that I can. Once you've identified what needs to change, then you need to make a plan and get prepared. I decided, what was I going to do? Was I going to wean off of screens? Some people do that. Was I going to wean off of gluten and dairy? No. For me, I just decided this needs to get dealt with. She's already 18 months old. I spoke about in the intro video about neuroplasticity. I knew that my time was very limited in the time frame that I had to help bring her back and heal her. So I just went cold turkey with everything. There was no weaning off period. I basically went online and I found recipes that were gluten-free. For instance, instead of using bread, I started to make a banana bread with almond flour and swerve. So there was no sugar in it. And I used that every single day for about 2 years. And she did very, very well on it. You know, those things are high in protein and stuff. Another thing I did was I tried a lot of different gluten-free pastas. Some she liked, a lot of those things that my family didn't like. Now we actually don't eat much pasta at all. But nonetheless, I did go and do alternatives, swaps with gluten-free stuff where I could, provided it wasn't very heavily processed. I really try and, as I said, I try and stick to whole foods and just good fats and proteins. The other thing I did do often was I would make my own homemade ice cream. I called it ice cream. You know, when your child doesn't have a sweet taste in their mouth, once the sugar taste is out, it can only be mildly sweet and they would like it. So what I did after about a week or two of going gluten-free and sugar-free, I actually went to the store and started to buy a variety of different vegetables that I could actually boil or steam, mostly steam where I could. Some of it I would actually cook in the Instapot. I would do like big batches. for instance, sweet potato, broccoli, regular potatoes, carrots, things like that. And I would cook them up, big batches, blend them until they were totally soft. And then I would separate each one into little bags and keep it in the freezer. And then every single day I would take out a variety. Every day was different. Today I would do sweet potato and carrot. The next day I would do something else. I would take those vegetables, put it in the blender with some frozen fruit, usually berries and mango, things like that. And I would blend it up till it's really, really smooth and add just, I don't know, a quarter cup or a third of a cup, maybe half a cup of vanilla coconut milk yogurt, and make my own kind of sorbet ice cream. And my kids started loving that. And honestly, when I started to make those changes, I started to see drastic changes in Dani, who, when I knew that there was a deficiency in her diet, because in her nails, I saw lots of white flecks and they were very rigid. And I knew with that there was a malnutrition issue. And I wasn't surprised because she wasn't eating anything. As I said, she wasn't eating anything other than bread, cheese, yogurt, and an occasional blueberry. So when I started this around the 6-month mark, I started to see that those flecks were almost gone because they go as the nail grows out. So it definitely made a huge difference. Meal prep where you can. I used to make that banana bread 8 loaves at a time. Once they've cooled, I used to cut them up into slices and then freeze 2 to 3 slices per little Ziploc bag, and then I'd freeze all those little Ziploc bags in one freezer bag. And that way, every morning I was able to just pull out one, toast them, and the kids, they loved it. Initially, it was a transition, but they grew to love the stuff that I was giving them that was completely sugar-free for the most part. Honestly, I always have plans for meals. I never try to wing it because I didn't have time with how much I was actually involved with her in. So I spent a lot of time meal prepping every single night after the kids had gone down for bed. I would take half an hour and make sure everything for the meals was already set up and ready to go for the next day. You need to decide whether or not you want to supplement with anything. I had done a lot of research on this, and I decided to include this particular supplement for Dani. I actually used to open the capsule and pour out some into her sorbet ice cream that I would give her every day and mix it in. You can go and have a look at this. As I said, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just simply telling you what I did because I knew she was nutrient deficient. I decided to keep everything as simple as possible to make the transitions easier. I didn't try and do anything elaborate with regards to meals. Simple, whole food, clean, as little processed food as possible, and as good and as much protein and fats, good fats as possible. I want to encourage you, if you are about to get started on something like this, the transition can be very hard. Stay strong, prepare yourself for big changes, prepare yourself for big reactions. There was a lot of crying that first week, but I am so thankful that I stuck to my guns and I just did it. When I cut the sugar, the dairy, and the gluten out, just being real with you, Dani virtually ate nothing for 2 days. She ate some banana and some apple. She refused and she cried and she cried and she cried and she cried. But I stuck to my guns, and by the 3rd day, she ate everything I gave her. She had refused to eat meat. She refused to eat vegetables. She refused. She used to throw the plate on the floor. By the 3rd day, she ate everything I gave her. I cooked chicken, I cooked beef, I gave her fish, I gave her everything, and she just gobbled it up. And it has never changed. Now, today, she eats everything.
Yeah, you gotta load it up with meat. That's good.
No, it doesn't matter what I give her, she's happy with it. It completely changed. And I know some kids have really severe sensory stuff. I believe Dani was one of them. I'll get into the stuff that I had to do for sensory with her. But I mean, when you are hungry enough, I believe you eat. And as I said, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not a doctor. Don't take this as advice. I'm telling you what I did to overcome some of those challenges. When I turned the television off, goodness me, it was intense. It was like a cloud of confusion came off of her. And honestly, it felt like she suddenly realized that I existed. Before, I was non-existent in the room, but when the TV was off, she suddenly realized I existed, and she became so clingy. She cried and cried and cried. She wanted to be with me all the time. Like, I could not leave the room to even go to the washroom. She had to come with me everywhere. It was very, very intense. Lots of crying, lots of clinginess for about 2, maybe 3 weeks. But after that period, I started to see that come down. It was amazing, really. It felt like a fog came off of her, and there was a sudden clarity in her of her surroundings. It was remarkable, and it was very, very noticeable. I'm going to create a document for you that is going to list everything that I did, all the steps that I took, as tools for those of you who might want to make use of that in your own healing and recovery journey with your child. If you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell so that you receive notifications when that document is released, because I'll create a video and say, okay, the document is ready, and give you a link on where you can actually go and get it. One of the things I did was I created a schedule that would incorporate all the therapies that I had to do with Dani into everyday life. If you know what a zero balance budget is, that's if, let's say you have $500, and a zero balance budget is when every cent of that $500 is allocated to something specifically. I did that with my time with Dani because there was so much that had to be done, and I needed structure to make sure I wasn't forgetting what had to be done. So every minute of every day was actually allocated to a very specific therapy, but I incorporated all the therapies into my daily life so that I wasn't necessarily only sitting doing a therapy. I was actually finding ways to do the therapy that I needed to do in everyday life, just incorporating it, making everything fun. I'll put examples of all of these things in the document I mentioned earlier. As an example, when I was driving Amelia to daycare, Dani would be in the car with me, and I would start right at the start of the day in the car with speech and language therapy. And it was very simple, and both of the kids loved it. They thought it was a game. And what it looked like was this. Let's say I was driving down the road. I would go slowly, and if a lady was walking her dog, I would point and I'd say, "Look, Dani, lady walking dog." Very short, very simple. "Look, Dani," point, "man sitting." "Look, Dani, aeroplane." "Look, Dani, school bus." Very simple. And then I would say, "Look," point, and see if she would interact with me. And that's how I used to incorporate speech and language while we were simply driving to school. And that was like a 20-minute drive. So by the time I got back home, I had actively been doing speech and language therapy with her in a way that she was actually contained and focused, because she couldn't go anywhere. She couldn't do anything. She was in her car chair, and she was literally following me and what I was doing for that full 40 minutes. So it was you can find ways to incorporate this into your daily life that's fun. And, kids learn through fun. They learn through play. So you've got to make this, what you're doing, enjoyable for them. My daily routine with Dani, often after dropping Amelia off at daycare, if the weather allowed, I would go straight to the park. I used to aim for about 2 hours of outdoor time every single day. And then what I would do is I would put her in her stroller, because she still wasn't walking at this time, and I would do the walking path at the local park. And I would stop and let her interact with everything, and then talk to her throughout that whole time. So what that looked like was, if I was on the walking path at the park, I would stop. There was a big construction site there actually on the one side. So I would stop at the fence, the steel fence, like a chain link fence, and I would let her touch it. I'd put her hand on it. "Look, Dani, fence, hard, smooth." I'd let her touch, feel, and hear everything that I was doing. Then I would continue pushing the stroller till I got to a tree. Take her hand, put her hand on the tree. "Look, Dani, tree, rough." Let her feel the bark. Carry on pushing. And if someone walked their dog past me, "Look, Dani, puppy, woof woof." "Look, Dani, lady walking." Very simple one-word things all the time. Take her out of the stroller, put her on the grass. As I said, she's not walking. Sit on the grass, let her feel the grass with her hand. Look, Dani, grass. Sometimes the grass was wet and I would just let her touch it. Look, Dani, wet. And then I would let her touch my shirt or something. Dry. Wet, Dani. Dry, Dani. Everything was just interacting. Pick a flower. Look, Dani, flower. Purple flower. Smell it for her. And then let her smell it. Smells nice. Purple flower. Very, very simple. She loved it. For the first time, it was like her eyes lit up and there was a recognition. She started to understand what I was saying. The problem with television is that there's no real sensory anything outside of visual. There's all this stuff happening in front of their eyes, but there's nothing to, feel, touch, anything like with that. And it completely messes up. This is what I was told. It completely messes up how the brain actually starts to function. You have to rewire the brain by having them be out and doing things and not just seeing things, but actually touching, feeling. On television, they'll sit and stare at the TV and they'll see the rain, but they don't feel it. They don't have any other corresponding things with it. That's why it's very important to have a parent-child interaction. It's not good enough to just turn the TV off. You need to physically interact. The parent-child interaction is what is the key link that's going to bring your child back, that's going to heal the brain, in my opinion. And it's just what we saw. So really, you want to create opportunities for them to see, touch, feel everything so that the brain can actually rewire itself, for lack of a better word or better term. That's what you're looking for. Create opportunities so that the brain can actually rewire. And I would literally do this with everything. If I was unpacking the dishwasher, like I said, I engaged her and kept her occupied with everything I was doing. I involved her. If I was unpacking the dishwasher, I would move her high chair, put her in that high chair, put the tray in so she couldn't move, and let her watch. And then I would talk to her throughout the whole thing. I would be drying the dishes, hold up a spoon, dry it. Look, Dani, spoon. Big spoon, small spoon. Look, Dani, bowl. Big bowl, small bowl. I'd often give it to her. I'd dry it, give her one of them, and pack the other one away, and then I would switch. So I was always interacting with her. If the weather didn't allow, I would take her to the grocery store, the supermarket. And we both loved going through the produce section with her because she just used to get so excited. Walk through. As I said, she was in the stroller at the time. So I would go through and say, look, Dani, point, apple. Look, Dani, banana. Give her the banana. She gets to touch, feel, smell the banana. Showed her all the different things. Once we'd gone through the whole produce section, I would often take her to the home section and show her different things that you would find in your own home. Whether it was plants, whether it was pots and pans, and knives and forks, just different things. Point everything out and speak in very simple language. Look, Dani, knife. Give her the knife. Make sure it's not sharp. You know what I'm saying though? Interact and let her be part of everything you're doing. But we spend as much time outside as possible. I remember in the home section, I would take her to the couches, the sofas, and be like, look, Dani, soft and squishy. And then take her to the desk. Look, Dani, hard. Let her touch things, let her feel things, let her see the difference. We created a lot of different sensory play opportunities for her. And this doesn't have to be expensive. I went to Dollarama, picked up a big plastic tub for virtually nothing, got a bunch of kinetic sand for $3 at the Dollarama, then bought little plastic animals, and we would hide it in the kinetic sand, make little balls. And then we would unwrap the balls together or just break open the sand and be like, oh, look, Dani, what animal is this? It's a horse. Look, Dani, what is it? What's in the sand? Horse. What's in the sand? Fish. Make it fun. They will engage with stuff like that. We did lots of water stations as well. I actually picked up a turf, an artificial turf, a square of artificial turf at, I think it was Home Hardware. And we put a table on that, and I had water stations, one a cold water station and a warm water station. She had severe, severe sensory problems with her feet. I spent hours and hours and hours brushing her feet with like a baby brush, and also massaging her feet. I had to massage and brush everywhere because of the sensory issues that she had. And she hated standing flat foot because of the sensory issues on her feet. So we bought the artificial turf to actually help her, but we couldn't get her to actually stand on it. The minute we got her on it, she would go on her tippy toes. So the way we countered that was, because we knew she loved water, we put a table out there and had water stations. And she loved the water so much, even though she hated the artificial turf, she started to stand at the table to play with the water. And slowly but surely, she went from tippy toes down to flat foot. Slowly. It took a long time, but she did it eventually. A sandpit is another great way to have a sensory play. There's lots of opportunities. They can build castles and sit in it and touch it and feel it. Make sure they don't eat it. Dani was putting everything in her mouth, I think because of the nutrient deficiency. She was eating gravel and all sorts of things. So I had to watch her like a hawk. Make sure you're not leaving them alone with things that could be choke hazards and stuff like that. As I said 100 times, this isn't medical advice. I'm sharing with you what I did so that you can see how we got the progress and the results that we got. Bubbles was another thing that we really utilized. Dani absolutely loved bubbles. And some of the sensory activities for the vestibular sensory processing issues that she had, she hated the therapies. She needed to swing. She had to be in the swing. The movement is what would kind of help her. But because of the vestibular problems that she had, she couldn't stand the movement. She didn't know where she was in space. She had no balance. And one of the ways we helped her actually get used to the swing was with bubbles. I'd put her in one of those baby swings that make you secure, that she can't fall out. And man, in the beginning, it was like the tiniest movement, and she would freak out. She hated it. But then I would blow bubbles, and she would forget that she was in the swing. And slowly but surely, I was able to increase that swinging. The same with the ball. One of the therapies I had to do in that 2 months that I was learning while I was in the therapy with her was bouncing her on, like, I think they called it a yoga ball or a Pilates ball. You just bounce her. Again, she hated it. It was so difficult.
Bubbles! Bubbles! Good job.
Oh, you got the bubble, Dani. Good job.
I couldn't do it with her because she would not allow it. So what we did was we would do it 3 times a day on the ball. My husband would bounce her very gently to start, just like the smallest movement. She's not even coming off the ball, just slight bounce on the ball. The only way we could do it was if my husband did it and I would blow bubbles while he was bouncing her. Actually, we did it twice a day, morning and night, thinking about it because he wasn't home in the middle of the day. So I would blow bubbles in the middle while she was actually being bounced, and slowly but surely we were able. And now if she does anything like that, she's the first one to like beg to go higher and stuff. We had a little trampoline that we would try and get her to bounce on, but she would not have it. Like nothing would get her to go on that thing, just because she had no idea where she was in space. She had no balance. She had really severe vestibular sensory processing problems. Amazingly, now we've got a big trampoline outdoors, outside, and she spends hours and hours and hours on that trampoline. She's always asking, can I go play? Can I go play? She loves it now.
This is us right now.
Then puzzles. Puzzles are a great way, and you can find a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, you can find on Facebook Marketplace, dirt cheap. We found so many kids' puzzles that have like fruit and animals and buildings and different kind of cars. And I would just sit with her and play with her, do puzzles with her and talk about what I was holding. Not elaborate. Look, Dani, pineapple, put it back. Look, Dani, banana, put it back. And when you're doing those things, talk. Putting in, take out, put in, take out, so that repetition brings revelation. That's what we were always taught in Bible school. Repetition brings revelation. So I just did the same process that we learned when we were learning scripture at school, but did it with all the things that I was doing with her, just again and again and again. As I said, I didn't leave Dani for hours with free play. Her stimming just went through the roof when if I wasn't engaged with her. She needed guided interaction. She needed guided interaction, so I involved her with everything I was doing, and I just made it fun. If I was folding laundry, she was sitting in the laundry playing with the clothes, and I would say, "Look, Dani, blue shirt, mommy folding shirt. Look, Dani, purple sock, mommy folding socks." Very simple stuff, but I made everything fun and she loved it. So just to briefly touch on vestibular processing, vestibular processing is how the brain processes movement and balance information. For example, enjoying swinging or being uncomfortable with that movement. And sensory modulation, this is the ability to respond appropriately to sensory information. As I said, Dani had a lot of problems in these areas. I had to massage and brush her body and her feet 3 times a day. She hated it. In the beginning, she absolutely hated it. The only way I could do it was if I had her in her high chair with the tray clipped in so she couldn't go anywhere. And I would feed her and she would kind of be distracted because of the food. And then I would also blow bubbles at the same time. And I would take one of those newborn baby brushes that you brush a newborn's hair with, and I would brush the under parts of her feet. I would massage her feet. I would brush her arms 3 times a day, 5 minutes aside. I would do that every single day. And I did that probably for 8 or 9 months, every single day, 3 times a day.
You gonna do some brushing, Dani? What's this? Oh, what is it? What is it? What is this? What is this? Yeah. Sweet baby. Num 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 num. Good job eating with a fork. Good job. Want me to help you? No? Fork. You say fork?
I also made sure she had the swinging and the bouncing every single day, at least twice a day. Most days, everything was 3 times a day, but my husband, the bouncing on the ball was the difficult one because I couldn't do it on my own. She would fight it and she wouldn't do it. So I had to wait for my husband to get home to do the ball bouncing, but we would do it in the mornings and in the evenings, and he would bounce her and I would blow bubbles just to keep her distracted until she was actually able to manage and survive through that movement. As I said, we aim for 2 hours outside every single day. If the weather was good, we would go to the park. If the weather was bad, or even just play in our garden. If the weather was bad, I would take her to the grocery store or to the mall, push her around, let her touch and feel different things. If all you can manage on a particular day, there were a few days where I just couldn't get out because of whatever was going on. And in those days, I would have her in the car. I would drive her around for half an hour, once or twice a day, have the window open just a little bit so she could feel. Usually that was when there was a lot of rain, a lot of snow. But I would have the window open so she could feel the wind or the rain, a little bit of drops, something, the cold on her, have the sensory feeling of what we were doing, and then talk to her. Like I was saying, "Look, Dani, bird flying. Look, Dani, squirrel." Whatever you see, make it simple, make it fun. So as I said, I would engage her every single day in every activity I was doing, whether it was grocery shopping, laundry, doing the dishes, whatever I was doing, I was engaging with her, and it always became a speech and language therapy session, but in a fun way. I made it fun, and I made it super simple. I also created tons and tons and tons of flashcards. They are very expensive to buy online. So I just created my own, printed them off, took them to Staples, got them printed and got them laminated so that I could reuse them. And I would often kill 2 birds with 1 stone. When she became sensory efficient, for lack of a better word, enough, I would have her in the swing and I would swing her and do flashcards at the same time. And I would, obviously, at the beginning, she couldn't talk, but I would do the talking. Look, apple. Look, banana. And then I did it with every category I could think of: clothing, kitchen items that you might find in your kitchen, household items. I think I said clothing, shoes, cars. I did it for everything I could think of: animals, farm animals, zoo animals, everything I could think of. I had a bunch of different flashcards and I would go through those every single day. One of the ways that we had to do therapy with her to get her to strengthen and be able to stand and get her to go flat foot was something called wall standing. Basically, prop her up against the wall because she couldn't balance, and give her something that was interesting for her to hold or look at. And I had a timer. I used to time how long she would go flat foot for because she was always up on her toes. So we would time it, and then I would help her stand by the wall, flatten her feet, and then always try and increase that time. I remember we started, it was like 13 seconds, and obviously now she's completely flat foot all the time. But at the beginning, it was not like that. And a lot of times when we were doing those wall standing exercises to strengthen the muscles and deal with the sensory issues in her feet, I did flashcards and bubbles.
You don't want it? Okay. You do want it? You want me? You're okay. Do you want to take a walk? Come to mommy. Come. Come on.
No.
Come on. Good job. Good job.
And then, of course, we celebrated every single victory. Every word that came out of her mouth that was linked to what she was seeing or doing. I'm not talking about echolalia because that's all she had in the beginning. She had a few words. There was a regression and she had a few words, but nothing was ever said with like meaning, no understanding behind what she was saying. She would just repeat things that I would say. She would sit flapping, say apple, 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 apple. No understanding of what she was saying, no idea why she was saying it. But when she actually started to say things with understanding and comprehension, we celebrated every victory, every word, every win. We celebrated loudly and excitedly. I made sure she knew that she was doing a great job. I stayed away from toys that had sounds. I don't know if it's true, but the speech and language pathologist said that it had been linked to other developmental delays. So as far as possible, I stayed away from those toys that had sounds, but anything that had a cause and effect, I used all the time. So those things that you have to bang this and something pops up, or drop the ball and the ball goes down, we did a lot of that. And then I would say, put it in, put it in, put it in. Look, Dani, ball go down, down. Look, Dani, ball in, down. Take out, put in, again and again and again. Anything that they're playing with, talk to them about it, whatever they're doing. If she's holding a purple mouse, say, purple mouse. Look, Dani, purple mouse. Here's a yellow mouse, purple mouse. Whatever they're doing, you just like make it simple and talk about what they're doing. I remember one of the things she used to love doing was we had these bubble ones. We had a big bottle that came with tons of different colored bubble ones. And she loved dumping those out and putting them in. And I would sit with her. Sometimes you don't try and force what you want to do because then it's not fun for them. You have to just engage in what they want to do. Just flex and flow and use whatever they're doing as a teaching experience. And because she loved that, I would sit with her and she would dump all the bubble ones out. And then as she would pick them up and put them in, I would say what she was doing. Yellow one in, green one in, purple one in. And they were different shapes as well. So if it was a star, I would say star in, circle in, So you can do that type of thing. And as I said, don't try and force the things that you want to do, because if kids learn by having fun, let them dictate which direction they're going in, what they're going to be playing with, and incorporate the fun. Just join in with them. As I said, puzzles are great for teaching different shapes, animals, all sorts of things. We picked up a very cheap play oven set from Facebook Marketplace, and I found like a pack of plastic food from, I think it was Dollarama or Walmart for like $5 or something. She loved it. It was the first time I'd ever seen her doing pretend play. She was stirring a bottle and stirring a bowl with a spoon and then pretending to feed the dolly. That's huge. She never used to do that stuff. And then because Dani wasn't walking, she needed some muscle strength to develop some muscle strength. And what I used to do to help that is I would have her sit on stairs. And as I said, we were sugar free at that time. So she loved raisins. So I would have her on the stair and I would do this 3 or 4 times a day, just for 5 or 10 minutes. Or it wasn't even a timing thing. I would just make her sit and stand, stand and sit like 10 times at a time. And then we would go and do something else. And I would kind of bribe her with raisins to do that. I would show them to her and then I'd be like, up, 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 and then help her up, and then sit down, up, 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 sit down. And every time she did it, I would give her a raisin. And then you have to understand she had no balance. She had very little strength. And like she didn't know where she was in space because of the vestibular issues. So it was a huge thing, 3 times a day. But I did that. And when I started doing that, it was very quickly, like within 2 or 3 weeks, she actually started to stand and then she started to walk.
Yeah, you're standing, Dani Benny. Woohoo! Look at you. Yay!
Look at you walking. You're getting so good. Oh my goodness.
Cruising.
You're a little cruiser now, Dani Benny. Huh? Look at that. Dani walking? Is Dani walking? Walk, walk, walk. Walk, walk, walk. Walk, walk, walk. Oh my goodness. Yay! Yeah, you're walking. Oh my goodness. Yay! 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 Good job.
The other thing we really did a lot to try and get her standing flat foot and walking was we had a little plastic table that she would stand at and play with sensory stuff like the kinetic stand and stuff like that. And I would sit with her on the floor next to the table. And while she was playing and I was interacting with her, I would slowly but gently move the table. So she was forced to walk with it and actually start to strengthen those muscles.
Good job walking.
Wow, that's an awesome sand block.
Good job, Dani.
Good job walking, honey.
It was a great tool, and I know that it had a lot to do with her learning how to actually walk, because they had told us to use walking bars. It was crazy. They said she wasn't going to walk. If she walked, they said it would take her a year and that she would have to have leg braces. These are the leg braces they told us that she would have to have. She refused to use the leg braces. She would not use the walking bars.
Good job. Come, Dani. You gotta walk.
No, no, you gotta.
Oh, you're okay. You don't like it?
But she was walking very quickly after I was doing these exercises. And it was a lot, I believe, to do with walking at the table, moving the table as she was playing, and just forcing her to walk without her even really realizing. There were a couple of things that I was always looking for with Dani when I was busy with her. The first thing is engagement. I didn't want her to just be physically present in what I was doing. I wanted her to actually be engaged. So if she was sitting on my lap and I was reading a book, I didn't want her to just sit on my lap and sit there. I wanted her to engage with me, touch and point to the different animals. If I asked her questions, what is that? Is she at least trying to say bear or worm or whatever is in the book, I wanted to see her actually interacting with me. Is she looking at the animals? Is she pointing to the animals? Is she trying to say what the animal is? And at least have her stay with an activity for several minutes at a time before, having a focus shift. The other thing that I looked for a lot was joint attention. Basically, this is when she and I are both focused on the same object, activity, or experience, but while actually being aware that the other is actually there. The key difference here is that she isn't just looking at an object, she's involving me in what she's doing and seeing. So, as example, if we are at the park and an aeroplane flies over, she looks at the aeroplane, points to the aeroplane, looks at me to see if I see the aeroplane, and then we both focus on it together. There's joint attention. Same with bubbles. If I'm blowing bubbles, I'm blowing, she's focused on it. She looks to me with excitement. Once the bubble's gone, she's more bubbles, So there's joint attention. We're working together, focused on the same thing, and we're aware that we're both looking and working with the same thing. The other thing is shared engagement. Can we do something together? Is she only playing independently and building blocks on her own? Or if I sit down and I start building a block tower, will she come and join me and actually build the block tower with me? It's very important, shared engagement. Then the other thing was co-regulation. Like, you need to be able to bring your child to your state. Let's say Dani was very attached to her blankie and her cloth. It was like her security items. If she lost those things, she would melt down. She would really struggle. I could escalate things or make things worse, or I could get down to her level, by my reaction, or I could get down to her level and I would say, Dani, lose cloth. Dani, lose blankie. Here, take my hand. Let's go find blankie. What you want to see is that emotional state match yours. Co-regulation, you want to see her ability to come down to where you are in those moments. The other thing that's very important is initiation. You want to see her or him begin to, initiate some stuff. Do they bring you toys to show you or want you to do something? That's very important. The first time Dani showed me a toy, I just about lost it because she had never done that. She wanted my engagement. It was huge. And then, of course, play skills, functional play. You don't want, Dani used to sit with cars and spin their wheels. That's all she used to do. You want to see functional play, playing appropriately with the right kind of toys. So if they have a car, vroom, vroom, not just spinning the wheel. So you're going to be looking for those types of things and demonstrate it for them so that they can see. And then, of course, imagination play, imaginative place. You want to see them pick up a spoon and a bowl and pretending stirring, or a bottle and pretend to feed the baby food. Like, I remember seeing Dani do that for the first time. She took a brush, the baby brush that I used to do her foot brushing with. She took the brush and she pretended it was a bottle and she was feeding her dolly. It was amazing. You have to understand, when your child's been diagnosed with autism, all of these things I'm talking about are non-existent. These things didn't feature in Dani's life, but through these activities and exercises and therapies I was doing with her, all of it came back. Reciprocal. Will she do something back and forth with you, even if it's sitting on the opposite side of the little room and roll a ball to each other? All of these things are very, very important. So I really hope that this has given you a baseline on where to start and how you can incorporate these things into your everyday life. It doesn't have to be complicated. I remember going to these speech therapies and the occupational therapy and the physical therapy, and it all seems so overwhelming because you just seem like, I can't do any of this. But honestly, it is so simple. The stuff they're doing is very simple. It's just time. You just have to make the time, be willing to actually do it. And I've given you lots of examples now how you can just incorporate this into your daily life. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be difficult. It is all-encompassing. And I'm not going to say it was easy. It wasn't easy. It was very hard to make these kind of adjustments. But as I said, 18 months later, Dani was a different child. She got the all clear. The doctors, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was incredible. And I pray, my prayer, honestly, is that this will be your story. Because why have more challenges for your child than necessary? It might take a little bit of, setting everything else aside, but it could lead to a whole life changed for the better. Amen. As I said, I'm going to create a document for you, and it'll include all of these things that I've done, including the flashcards that I used, everything that I did, I'm going to include for you so that, your journey doesn't have to be as difficult and intense as mine was. We love you. We're praying for you. We're praying for your recovery. And I want to hear about your testimonies, okay? So if you've got a kid that you're working with and you want to share, I want to hear. I want to hear from you. shapingtheschroders@gmail.com, okay? Please share your testimonies. It's going to help and encourage other people. See you next week. Bye.